Hey guys, welcome back to Corey's Confusing Book Reviews, where I talk about the random books that I'm reading. And up this week is an older book that I've read before called Clean Code: A Handbook of Agile Software Craftsmanship by Robert C. Martin. Too long. Didn't watch. This is a programming book, so if you're not a programmer, you could skip this video because it's not relevant for you. uh, if you are a programmer, this is a good book. I think it's a worth read, especially if you haven't done a lot of reading on software quality and craftsmanship and stuff like that. I think this is a good summary of, in particular, OO style programming practices. But yeah, so let's get into it. So yeah, if you don't know anything about Robert C. Martin, first of all, if you've never seen the guy talk, he's like one of the best technical talkers or whatever. He puts out some of the best talks in programming, like conference talks and stuff like that. He's a very enjoyable speaker. That's where I first learned about him was his speaking, public speaking that he did in conferences. Because I watch a lot of conference talks. So if you haven't done so, look up some of his talks. They're really great. I will say people who are really judgmental or whatever, and they snag onto every negative detail, might want to characterize him as a little arrogant and I don't know, bravado or something like that, a little blasé or whatever. I don't know what the words are, but they might rub him the wrong way. He might rub some people the wrong way. He is a very, I guess, a traditional kind of person or whatever. And so maybe he doesn't fit the mold of most of the public discourse right now. And that's as far as we're going to go into this. But I will say that I love the talks he puts out. I love the books that he has written, and we'll leave it at that. I think he's fundamentally a good guy, and well worth becoming acquainted with. Well, let's do the blurbs here. So this was written in 2009. I have some other books here, programming books that are a bit older. I have the Pragmatic Programmer and Refactoring, which we'll get to eventually. And some of these books I read after I'd already read these, and so quite a bit of the programming, code quality, and stuff like that books, I think, are now summarized like in these clean codes. So I have the clean coder and the clean architecture and stuff like that. So it's kind of a lot of these books start. It's kind of like it when you're talking about productivity books or whatever, where you start learning like the getting things done or I don't know, 7 habits of highly effective people or whatever. So eventually the same ideas start getting repeated over and over. It was the same thing with code quality books, apparently. And so I think this is a good summary from the limited amount of experience I have with these types of books. This is a pretty decent summary of everything else that I had already read. It's got all the tips and tricks and stuff and everything that some of the earlier books that I eventually got around to reading. There wasn't really any value in reading them because I'd already read this book. If that makes any sense. So anyway, yeah, so it's 2009, so it's relatively modern. I know that's like over 10 years old now, but where this is in the stage of things this is like peak OO, right? OO is the de facto way that you program. You have classes and interfaces and abstract classes and factories and and all of that, and the design patterns and all of the jargon surrounding domain driven design and all and TDD and all that stuff. So this is peak OOism. This is, I would say, I think this is like right when this book come out. The reason why I recommend this book, because this is like summarizing all of the wisdom from that era, I think, up until this point, about how you do that type of programming. And this was before functional programming really started digging its heels into everything now. So like even like all of the new languages coming out, they borrow heavily from functional programming, like Rust. It's one of the most recent examples where they've almost gotten really, there's really no OO in Rust, and it's borrowed, but you could do OO style stuff in Rust, but it's also very clearly functional style programming as well. Maybe not the style that's like in Haskell or something, but there's very clear borrowing from that style of language and stuff like that. So anyway, tangent aside, this is peak OO dogma. Put it that way. So let's do the blurb on the back. Clean code, even bad code can function, but if code isn't clean, it can bring a development organization to its knees. Every year, countless hours and significant resources are lost because of poorly written code, but it doesn't have to be that way. Noted software expert Robert C. Martin presents a revolutionary paradigm with Clean Code, a handbook of agile software craftsmanship. Martin has teamed up with his colleagues from Object Mentor to distill their best agile practice of clean code on the fly into a book that will instill you with values of a certain craftsman and make you a better programmer, but only if you work at it. What kind of work will you be doing? You'll be reading code, lots of code, and you will be challenged to think about what's right about the code and what's wrong with it. More importantly, you will be challenged to reassess your professional values and your commitment to your craft. And that last little bit, that is something I really think that Martin really pushes more than any other like creator in the space, and it's the idea of professional responsibility. That it's not just enough to have code that works. It's not just enough to have code that's performant or whatever. It's also the professional discipline, and he has one of the books that's almost exactly, The Clean Coder is almost explicitly about professionalism in the profession. And anybody who knows anything about the industry knows we could use a lot more professionalism in our profession. So, there's more on the back here, but there's lots of there's straight up code in here, guys. You can see that. So he has a lot of examples about things, code smells, and best practices and things to try to avoid. I don't think he ever says you absolutely should not be doing X, but maybe here's another way you can do it. Maybe that's a little bit better and that kind of thing. I think he just does a really great job of explaining how to organize code, and in particular how to refactor code into a better quality and stuff like that. So I think this is especially if you're a junior developer and you haven't done a lot of reading on code quality and stuff. Even if you're not really doing a bunch of strictly OO stuff, you're doing JavaScript and stuff like that, I think this still applies. But it still talks about, encapsulation, which you can do encapsulation without at the module level. You don't need to actually use classes. I know JavaScript has classes, but they're all public and anything. But you could do modules, and it's some people argue that the level of encapsulation we wanted was at the module level, not the class level. But that is it's a debate for another day. But it talks about design anything. I think this may even be where the whole idea of composition versus inheritance, kind of debate kind of really kind of started. He is very famous for his support for test-driven development and agile. And to go back to when this book was 2009, so it was like over 10 years ago. So this was, I think, maybe before agile meant whatever you wanted it to mean. I think this was before Scrum and all of that other jazz. And I'm not going to get into the dogma of agile and stuff like that. I think at its simplest core is agile is about developers controlling the development process and working in very small, frequent iterations, and anything that deviates from that, adding more process to that, maybe is agile TM, meaning fake agile. So I'm not going to get into that, but he was one of the first people talking about agile and stuff like that. He was also the person that convinced me to start working or experimenting with TDD, which I think is a useful practice to learn. And I do believe that it is a practice. It is a skill that you have to learn how to do. Just like you had to learn how to program, you need to learn how to test. And I think it's a very useful skill. I still in the process of learning how it applies to my own practice, like how much I apply it, where I apply it. He's very much a staunch, like every line of code is tested nearabouut and stuff like that. And there are, of course, a gamut of opinions where you don't really need, other people say, well, you only need integration tests. And then other people's like, well, you only need to test business logic. And so there's a whole spectrum of testing. There's even people who say, well, there's a thing called test-driven development, that test-driven damaged, where code quality suffers because it's in the service of testing things that maybe don't need to be tested anyway. It's a complex topic, but he is one of the proponents of test-driven development. He's one of the people who taught me to do test-driven development, at least the principles of it and everything. And there's great content online where he teaches how to do that stuff. There's one demo he does, one talk he does, where he actually literally goes from start to finish, and he talks about how the assertions that you use, like during the process, the things that you assert in your test, and then of course you make it pass in the actual code, how the type of assertion determines the solution that you arrive at. So that it's not just something, you can't just do any assertion, as far as the tests matter. The thing and the way that you're testing matters as to what kind of code you're going to end up with in the end, right? If you're doing things really TDD. What is the name of that talk? Anyway, you'll find it if you start looking around at test-driven demo or whatever by Robert C. Martin. Something priority or something like that. So it's a great book. I think especially if you're a junior developer, you should definitely read this book. If you haven't read a lot of code quality and craftsmanship books, this is a very good summary of a very good summary, very good survey of the important principles that you probably need to at least be aware of. I think all of the code is like in Java and stuff, so that's another thing. So if you're not familiar with Java, this might be a little bit off-putting, but I think most people know a Java or C# style language, or at least you should, because it's the elephant in the room, guys. But it's a great book, highly recommended, and we'll stop it there. And I'll see you guys next time. I think we'll be doing the way forward. All right. Catch you guys next time.